December 31st, 1968. Snow was falling in Illinois. The temperature at La Harpe had dropped to roughly 22 degrees below zero, and sitting outside Fred Gibb Chevrolet were two brand new Camaros that looked almost ordinary. Almost. Under their hoods was something Chevrolet had never put into a Camaro before. A 427 cubic inch all-aluminum V8. Not a mild street engine, not a luxury option. A race-bred power plant designed around the brutal demands of NHRA superstock competition. And somehow Chevrolet had made it legal to drive one home from the dealership. But there was a problem. These cars were so expensive that even Chevrolet wasn't sure ordinary customers would buy them. And what happened next turned 69 Camaros into one of the most legendary muscle cars America has ever built. Most people know the name ZL1. Very few realize how strange the story really was, because Chevrolet didn't simply decide to build 69 ultimate Camaros. It happened because a dealer wanted to go drag racing. Racing rules demanded a production run, and a complicated loophole inside General Motors opened a door that was never supposed to exist. You think you know the 1969 Camaro? Not like this. In the late 1960s, Chevrolet was fighting a horsepower war on every front. Ford had the Cobra Jet Mustang, Dodge had the Hemi-powered Dart and Super Bee, Pontiac was building increasingly serious street machines, Plymouth was dropping 440s into everything they could, and Mercury's Cyclone was making noise on both the street and the track. And in the middle of all of it was the Camaro, Chevrolet's answer to the Mustang. The Camaro already had serious firepower. The SS396 was a legitimate performer. The Z28 was carving up road courses in SCCA competition, but there was a corporate restriction hanging over Chevrolet. Engines above 400 cubic inches weren't supposed to be available in the Camaro through normal production channels. General Motors had established this policy across its intermediate and pony car platforms. It was supposed to keep the smaller cars from cannibalizing sales of larger models. It was supposed to maintain some sense of order in the product lineup. That should have ended the story. Instead, it created the perfect opportunity for something called COPO, Central Office Production Order. Normally, COPO was an internal ordering system used for unusual fleet and commercial combinations. Police departments ordering special equipment, taxi companies requesting heavy-duty components, municipal fleets needing specific configurations that weren't listed in the regular catalog. But clever Chevrolet dealers and engineers had discovered that it could also be used to request combinations that weren't available through the regular Camaro option list. And one of those men was Fred Gibb. Gibb wasn't just a Chevrolet dealer. He was a serious drag racer, and he had a problem. Other cars were getting faster. The competition was intensifying every season. NHRA Superstock was becoming more sophisticated, and Gibb needed an edge. So he approached Chevrolet product man Vince Piggins with a radical idea. Take Chevrolet's new aluminum 427 race engine and put it into the Camaro. Piggins was already known inside Chevrolet as someone who understood performance. He'd been instrumental in developing the Z28. He knew what racers needed. And more importantly, he understood how to navigate GM's bureaucracy to make special projects happen. The engine was known as the ZL1, and it was absolutely ridiculous. The block and cylinder heads were aluminum, cutting well over 100 pounds compared with a comparable iron big block. The engine displaced 427 cubic inches with a massive 4.25-inch bore and a 3.76-inch stroke. The official compression ratio was around 12:1. The factory rating, 430 horsepower at 5,200 revolutions per minute. And even that number didn't tell the whole story. In serious racing trim, with freer flowing exhaust and tuning, the engine could produce well over 500 horsepower. Period testing and later evaluations have shown just how much potential was hiding inside the factory combination. Some racers claimed even higher numbers once the engine was fully unleashed. This wasn't an engine designed to impress someone at a stoplight. It was designed to survive competition. The ZL1 used a high-performance solid-lifter valvetrain, rectangular port aluminum cylinder heads, a high-rise aluminum intake, and a large Holley 4-barrel carburetor. Its factory rating was 450 pound-feet of torque at 4,400 revolutions per minute, according to period specifications compiled by Camaro researchers, while other published factory figures varied depending on rating methodology and documentation. The valve sizes were enormous for the era. The camshaft profile was aggressive, and the entire package was built to tolerances that went far beyond normal production standards. And there was another reason Gibb wanted it. NHRA homologation rules required a minimum number of production cars before a combination could qualify for competition. The magic number was 50. The cars had to be production vehicles, not hand-built specials. They had to be available for sale to the public. They had to meet the sanctioning body's definition of a legitimate factory option. So Gibb made a commitment that sounded insane. He would order 50 Camaros. Chevrolet could build the engines, the cars could become legal competition machines, and the public could theoretically buy them. Simple, right? Not even close. Because Chevrolet now had to turn a race engine into something that could leave a dealership with a warranty. That meant cooling, ignition, suspension, rear-end strength, street equipment, emissions considerations, a legal compliance, and all the little details that separate a race car from something you're legally allowed to drive down Main Street. The resulting package became COPO 9560. The ZL1 Camaro received the aluminum 427, a heavy-duty 4-core radiator, transistorized ignition, special springs, a cold air induction hood, power front disc brakes, and a heavy-duty 12-bolt positraction rear axle with 4.10 gears. Buyers could choose an automatic transmission or one of several Muncie 4-speed transmissions. The suspension was beefed up to handle the power and the violent launches. The brakes were upgraded because stopping a 427-powered Camaro required serious hardware. Even the battery and alternator were upgraded to handle the electrical demands. Think about what Chevrolet had created. A Camaro with a race-derived 427, a 4.10 rear axle, a solid lifter engine, and a cold air hood feeding a big 4-barrel. It wasn't subtle, and it definitely wasn't civilized. The idle was lumpy, the clutch was heavy if you ordered the 4-speed, the engine wanted to be at wide-open throttle, not crawling through city traffic. But then Chevrolet hit a wall. The price. The original expectation was that the package would cost roughly $2,000 over the normal Camaro. Instead, the ZL1 option alone added approximately $4,160, pushing the complete car's price to around $7,200. That's an astonishing figure for 1969. To put that in perspective, you could buy a well-equipped full-size Chevrolet for less. You could buy 2 basic Camaros for roughly the same money. A normal Camaro could be bought for dramatically less. The ZL1 wasn't just expensive, it was financially terrifying. Fred Gibb had committed to 50 cars, but the economics were suddenly ugly. Who was going to walk into a Chevrolet dealership and spend roughly $7,200 on a Camaro? Especially when most buyers couldn't even tell the difference from the outside. There was no massive hood scoop screaming about what was underneath, no wild graphics package, no chrome callouts announcing ZL1 to the world. And remember, this was 1969. This wasn't a collector car, it wasn't an investment, it was a brand new Chevrolet sitting on a showroom floor next to ordinary Camaros. And under the hood was an engine that could make a race car out of it. Then came another problem. The cars weren't arriving fast enough. The first ZL1 Camaros were urgently needed for drag racing, but Chevrolet's production system was already overloaded with ordinary Camaro orders. The 1969 Camaro was brand new, completely redesigned from the 1967 to 68 generation. Production was ramping up, demand was enormous, and somewhere in the middle of all that, Chevrolet had to squeeze in these bizarre special order race cars. Gibb pushed, Chevrolet pushed, and eventually, someone high enough in the company stepped in. 2 cars were rushed through production and delivered to Fred Gibb Chevrolet on December 31st, 1968. The weather was brutal. The cars reportedly wouldn't even start in the extreme cold. The aluminum engine block dissipated heat so quickly that getting the ZL1 to fire in sub-zero temperatures was nearly impossible. But there was no time to waste. One of those cars was sent to Dick Harrell's operation in Kansas City. Harrell was one of the most respected drag racers and engine builders of the era. He built a reputation transforming street cars into legitimate race machines, and now he had one of the most extreme factory cars Chevrolet had ever produced. He had roughly 3 weeks to transform this brand new Camaro into a serious superstock contender. The target was the NHRA winter meet in Phoenix. The clock was ticking, and the ZL1 wasn't ready. The car had to be prepared, tested, and transported. Headers had to be installed. The carburation had to be tuned. The suspension had to be adjusted for maximum weight transfer. Tires had to be selected and tested. Even worse, when the team reached the event, the Camaro ran into a technical inspection problem involving its carburetor specification. The ultimate race, Camaro had arrived at the race and couldn't simply go out and dominate. Racing is rarely simple. Even with the best hardware, success requires preparation, testing, and sometimes a bit of luck, but that was only the beginning. Once the ZL1s began reaching the drag strip, the real difference became obvious. The Camaro's aluminum 427 was brutally responsive. That 4.25-inch bore allowed Chevrolet to move a tremendous amount of air through the engine. The 3.76-inch stroke kept piston travel relatively short for a 427, helping the big block operate at high RPM. And because the block was aluminum, the engine was dramatically lighter than a comparable iron big block. That mattered. Every pound removed from the front of a Camaro changed the car. It affected weight transfer. It affected traction. It affected how aggressively the car could launch. It affected how the car balanced during acceleration. And when you were trying to win a quarter-mile race by fractions of a second, that mattered enormously. With the factory configuration, published performance figures put the ZL1 in the low 13-second range. With headers, racing tires, tuning, and other competition modifications, these cars could enter the 11-second range and beyond. Contemporary accounts and later documentation describe serious ZL1 race cars running deep into the 10s. Some of the most extensively modified examples went even quicker. That's the part most people miss. The ZL1 wasn't really a 430 horsepower Camaro. It was a 430 horsepower Camaro on paper. The hardware underneath was built with far more ambition. The factory rating was partly about the way horsepower was officially measured and reported in that era. It was also about insurance and liability, and keeping regulators from asking too many questions. Racers didn't care about the brochure. They cared about what happened when the throttle hit the floor. And when that happened, the ZL1's personality changed completely. The engine screamed, the solid lifters hammered away, the big Holly fed the 427. The 4.10 gears multiplied the torque, and behind the driver, the 12-bolt axle was doing everything it could to survive. This was a street-legal Camaro that behaved like a race car because, in many ways, that's exactly what it was. But now came the strangest part of the story. Chevrolet had built 50 cars for Gibb. Then other dealers discovered what was happening. Word spread through the Chevrolet dealer network. Performance-oriented dealers wanted in. Racers started calling their local dealerships. Demand for these bizarre COPO Camaros spread. The original 50 weren't all easy for Gibb to sell. The price was simply too high. Only 13 were ultimately sold directly by Gibb, and many of the remaining cars were redistributed. Other dealers placed additional orders, and that is how the number became 69. Not 500, not 1,000, not even 100. Just 69 production ZL1 Camaros were built for 1969, distributed through 41 Chevrolet dealers. That's what makes the story so strange. The ZL1 wasn't some secret prototype that escaped a factory. It was a genuine production Chevrolet. It had a VIN, it had a warranty, it had all the proper documentation. It could be registered for the street, and technically you could buy one, but almost nobody did. The cars were simply too expensive, too extreme, too specialized. Some were purchased by serious racers, some were modified almost immediately. Some had their engines removed and sold separately because the ZL1 engine itself was incredibly valuable. Engine swaps were common because the ZL1 power plant could transform almost any Chevrolet into a monster. Others sat unsold at dealerships. Chevrolet reportedly had cars returned and redistributed, and some examples remained unsold for years. Imagine walking into a dealership in 1969. You see a Camaro. It looks like a Camaro. Maybe it has the cowl induction hood. Maybe it's painted in one of Chevrolet's bright colors. Then the salesman tells you the price. $7,200. You ask why. He opens the hood, and suddenly the price makes sense. Because sitting there is an aluminum 427 that weighs roughly 500 pounds and was closely related to Chevrolet's most serious racing hardware. This wasn't simply a big engine. It was Chevrolet taking its racing technology and putting it into a production car, and then putting that car on a dealer's showroom floor. That's the hidden truth behind the ZL1. It wasn't created because Chevrolet thought customers needed more horsepower. It was created because racers needed Chevrolet to satisfy the rules. The public sale requirement was the bridge between racing and the showroom, and Chevrolet crossed that bridge. The ZL1 also revealed something important about the muscle car era. There was a limit to how far manufacturers could push the horsepower war. The ZL1 was expensive, specialized, and difficult to sell. It represented the absolute peak of what could be justified as a production vehicle. Beyond this point, the cars became too extreme for normal customers. The world was changing too. Emissions regulations were becoming stricter. Insurance costs were rising. Fuel economy was becoming more important. Safety standards were increasing. And the days of stuffing enormous, high-compression engines into relatively small cars were numbered. The Camaro would continue. The muscle car era would continue for a little while longer. But the wildest machines were already becoming artifacts of a disappearing moment. And the ZL1 became the ultimate symbol of that moment. A Chevrolet dealership could technically sell you one. You could drive it on public roads. You could take it to the drag strip. You could order a 4-speed. You could select a 4.10 positraction rear axle. And under your right foot was a 427 that Chevrolet had originally developed for much more serious purposes. Only 69 people got that opportunity in 1969. And today, those 69 cars are among the most valuable and desirable Camaros ever built. One documented ZL1 has even sold for more than $1 million at auction, showing just how far the value of these once unsellable cars has risen. Multiple examples have crossed the 7-figure threshold. Cars that dealers struggled to move are now treated like automotive royalty. Think about the irony. In 1969, the ZL1 was almost too expensive for customers to want. Dealers couldn't give them away at $7,200. Decades later, the same rarity that made it difficult to sell became the reason collectors desperately wanted one. The car that dealers struggled to move became a 6- and 7-figure legend. And the reason isn't simply horsepower, it's the story. A drag racer wanted a better Camaro. Chevrolet engineers found a way around the normal restrictions. NHRA rules demanded 50 cars. Chevrolet built 69. And those 69 cars carried one of the most outrageous engines ever installed in a factory Camaro. The ZL1's greatest trick wasn't that it could make more than 500 horsepower in the right configuration. It was that Chevrolet somehow made that kind of machinery legal for the street in the first place. The 427 had a 4.25-inch bore, a 3.76-inch stroke, roughly 12, 1 compression, and a factory rating of 430 horsepower. But the numbers only tell half the story. The other half is the sound, the aluminum block, the solid lifters, the Holley 4-barrel, the 4.10 gears, the violent launch, the smell of racing fuel, the way the car felt when all 427 cubic inches came alive, and the realization that the Camaro beside you at the stoplight might not be an ordinary Camaro at all. It might be one of 69, one of the rarest factory muscle cars Chevrolet ever sold, one of the most extreme combinations ever to leave a factory with a warranty. And that's why the 1969 Camaro ZL1 still matters. It wasn't the biggest production run. It wasn't the cheapest performance car. It wasn't even the easiest car to live with. It was something much more unusual. It was a loophole turned into a weapon, a race engine disguised as a street car, a moment when the horsepower war reached its absolute peak. And for one brief moment in 1969, Chevrolet allowed the public to buy it. If you enjoyed this story, let me know what forgotten muscle car or legendary engine you want to see next. And if you want more deep dives into the machines that pushed American performance to the absolute limit, make sure you subscribe.